All right, guys, thank you for coming. Part two for your project Q&A. The agenda today, I would like to talk about, to begin with, I would like to emphasize again about the action patterns for enemies. That seem to be a very common source of confusion. That'll be very important for you to get right for both phase one and phase two. I'll speak about enemies pattern first, and then I'll speak about scoring, about how you can calculate a score whenever an enemy is destroyed. I'll talk about it, give you some concrete example. And then number three, I'll speak about the AT015. So that'll be another long test cases that you were given as a starter test. So these are the three items on the agenda. Okay. Hopefully I can finish within 90 minutes. If there's any spare time left, you can definitely ask questions. But as usual, interrupt me just just speak up. You know, I certainly don't mind. All right. Let me just go over very quickly about the questions you guys kind of put between yesterday and today. I already wrote my responses over here. Okay, I just want to mention very quickly. Philip actually got some issued about maybe in the ETF model at the runtime. He got a feature called avoid targets issue. So I have actually received quite a number of similar issues so far, and this will be the way to actually resolve it. So I'm not going to read it. So Philip, please give it a try. And then if it doesn't work, speak to me, and then we can look at that together on your screen. Basically, the idea would be you don't want to break the circularity between maybe model and other routine. You don't want to really make them call each other. So it's going to result in like an infinite recursion. Okay, so that will be the issue there. Give it a try, and then let me know. Another question here. Any hints to guide you to the right direction for implementing the debug mode? So my advice would be the main idea. You don't really want to think about debug versus normal for every function, right? Let's say there are 50 different functions related to different aspect of the game. You don't really want to think about debug versus normal for every of those functions. You don't want to. The only place you want to think about the normal versus debug mode function would be the out feature. Remember in the ETF tutorial, in the default ETF model class, the out routine. So whatever return value as a string over there is going to determine what you will output to the terminal. So I would say, so that's why I said separation of concern. So one concern would be for all the functions that are related to the logic of the game, you want to simply assume it's going to be the debug mode, because debug mode will give you the much more information. So program that as if the debug mode is always the case, number one. The other concern would be, what if currently the game, the states is simply just a normal, not really debug. In that case, you will have to be, you have to say in the out feature over here, out routine, you have to maybe have some flag, checking to see whether the current mode is normal versus debug. Only in that single function there where you actually tune the output to be either debug output or normal output. So separation of concern. I think that'll be a reasonable design to go forward without having spaghetti code. If you have to worry about versus normal versus debug for every routine, you definitely got spaghetti code. All right. Again, for those of you who might be interested in checking your logic regarding this respect, again, visit my office hour. So again, it will be next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just normal time. Okay, another question here. Can you go over some examples on how to use observer pattern and event-driven design in the project? I would love to, but actually we got very limited time today, so I will rather stick to the agenda. However, I can give you some advice over here. So basically, whether you really want to use observer pattern or event-driven design is up to your design judgment. You may want to use it, or you may decide it's not necessary. It's up to your judgment. So the best way to go forward with this would be either sketch your design or try to implement something to begin with without any guidance from me first. And then maybe next week, drop by my office hour the first thing, and then we can talk about your design using observer or event-driven design. Okay, that's something you would have studied already for this week. All right, so that's about the questions I got from the Google Doc. Okay, I finished everything in the Google Doc. So let me just go back to our normal agenda. All right, guys, again, whenever you got any clarification needed for the project about the logic of the game, please post on the forum. As you can see, we try to answer your questions as soon as we can, both me and Kevin. Right, just do it. Put it over there. You can get the most prompt response. All right, so let's talk about today. Okay, I would like to revisit this particular diagram we did yesterday. Yesterday was a little bit like a sketch on the fly, so it was accurate. I'm just saying. Let me revisit this just to show to you once more, just to clarify. Okay, so idea is really about how the enemies will act. Okay, and then I will talk about two enemies, for example, because for AT015 we are going to talk about grunt and also interceptor. So I can talk about these two enemies as example. Okay, let me talk about, again, you want to, again, so there are two sections you want to go to. You can see the references over here. Let me just show you once more, and then I'll talk about it. Okay, so first of all, go to your instruction, okay, and then, sorry, let me just get my PDF from the other screen. Okay, so this, you know what, might be easier if I simply drag and drop that to here. That'll be much easier. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now if you look at the instruction, let me just tell you which section you should go to. If you go to the enemies act over here, phase number 5. Okay, so now you can let me just try to help you read it. Okay, you can see that there are basically two phases over here, right? And then when we say see the next point, so that the next point is really about how each action can be generalized over here, right? So you can think about this particular part over here is really about how each enemy is supposed to act. I'll go back to this paragraph in just a moment. Just remember the highlighted part I'm doing here. Just 3 items in the list. Okay, this is one position you want to refer to. Another one is the messages.txt. If you go to messages.txt, go to section 7 and also enemy action. Okay, if you go there, as I pointed to you yesterday, we actually got phase 1 and phase 2. Basically, phase 1 is really about the preemptive actions if triggered. So preemptive actions are not necessarily triggered every time, not necessarily. If it's triggered, then you have the phase 1. And for phase number 2, so there are 2 cases for phase number 2. Either because the previous preemptive action are triggered, and also it does not end the turn. You have the normal action. That's case number 1. Case number 2, maybe if there was simply no preemptive action for the particular kind of enemy. So you always just got the normal action, right? You can read the instruction for more detail. And then we got the case 1, case 2, case 3 over here. Specifically, we got case 3.1, we got case 3.2. And then we say that for both cases 2 and 3, you got this particular sequence over here. Think about the sequence over here somehow correspond to this highlighted part over here, right? I'm just trying to help you see the correspondence, right? Just keep that in mind, okay? Let me go back to here and mention again, and then see some concrete examples. Okay, so now we talk about phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is only about preemptive action, which may or may not be triggered. And also we got phase number 2, so we got non-preemptive action. So now for the non-preemptive action, as you can see from your instruction, either the Starfighter is seen by the enemy or they are not seen by the enemy, right? So either case, not both. So there are 3 scenarios you want to talk about. We got scenario number 1, number 2, and number 3, okay? For scenario number 1, so that means that the particular enemy's preemptive action have been triggered. And then the triggered preemptive action do not end their turn. So that means they will have a second phase, the green one. Okay. The scenario number 2, the preemptive actions are triggered, however, they end the turn. So that means you don't have any phase 2. Okay. Scenario number 3, if either there is no preemptive action or the preemptive action are simply not triggered, in that case, you just got the normal action over here. So we got scenario 1, 2, and 3. And to help your reading into the instruction. So the case 1, case 2, and case 3.1, case 3.2 over here. So these case number here are completely corresponding to the messages.txt over here, right? You can remember we got the case 1, 2, and 3 over here, right? So I'm not going to read it. You can read it. I just want to show you the correspondence. So let's see some concrete example here. Oh, before I do that, what about the health regen for the enemy? So when you do the regen for scenario number 2 and number 3, it's easy. You simply do it in the beginning, either in the beginning of the preemptive action, or you do it in the beginning of the non-preemptive action. Scenario 2 and 3 are straightforward. But for scenario number 1, you got to be careful. You don't really do it over here in the beginning of the preemptive action, because there will be phase 2. So you only do the regen over here, right? That's also set in the instruction. I just want to emphasize. All right. So these are the something I discussed already yesterday, but the correspondence were not very accurate from yesterday, but just want to clarify quickly. All right, let's see example over here, right? Having this picture in mind, I just got some paragraph from your PDF instruction about the enemy, right? Since we're going to talk about grunt and also the interceptor, let's talk about how we can apply the pattern over here, right? Let's try to read it together. So we talk about the grunt. And then, so either you got preemptive action. So you can think about this guy over here, preemptive action. So this part over here is really phase 1. I'll just say P1. And this part over here is going to be phase 2. And notice that phase 1 here does not have to occur every time, because phase 1 for grunt will only occur, for example, if the Starfighter passes, or if the Starfighter uses a special. So these are the only triggering conditions for phase 1 to happen for grunt. Okay, so now for grunt, so there are 2 scenarios you have to watch out for. For the grunt, when we actually got pass, or we got special, right? The triggering condition. In that case, you're just going to get phase 1. And then remember, for every preemptive action, we will specify whether that particular preemptive action is going to end the turn. In this case, it will. Oh, sorry, it does not. Sorry, beg your pardon. It does not end the turn, which means after P1, there will still be P2. Okay, so that's when the preemptive action actually occurs for the grunt. What about another scenario? Another scenario for the grunt would be if it's neither pass nor special. In that case, P1 wouldn't occur, so you only get P2. And now in this case, when would you do the regen? You will do the regen basically over here for grunt, and also you do the regen over here for the grunt. We will see some example today, all right? That's about how to apply this pattern over here to the grunt, all right? Let's do a similar idea. Let's do the similar application to interceptor, okay? Let's read about the interceptor quickly over here together, right? So you can see for interceptor, we also got preemptive action, but they only occur if the Starfighter fires, right? And notice one thing here, it says that in order to do the preemptive action, we will attempt to move in a particular way. I'll let you read the details. However, they said before ending the interceptor's turn. So that implies after the preemptive action, where it's triggered by the fire, the turn should end positive, right? That's what it implies. What if the preemptive action does not occur? In that case, you're going to go for phase 2 over here, right? So now I would suggest you try to understand this way. Think about this part over here, this part. So this part here is really for the preemptive action. So I would say this part is phase 1. And then this part over here is about phase 2, the non-preemptive action. So now let's talk about what's going to happen for interceptor, right? Interceptor over here. Yeah, it will be useful to understand these 2 patterns over here, so that we, when I go over the example, we can save some time, right? Okay, so let's talk about this. It will interceptor will only be triggered by the fire, which means if it's a fire. In that case, we're going to get P1, and then after P1, you can see they said before ending the turn. So which means after P1, there should not be P2, right? The turn should end right away. And then if there is no fire, that means we're going to get into just P2, right? You can see the behavior, the possible behavior between grunt and interceptor is a little bit different, right? When the preemptive action is triggered for grunt, you still got P2. But for the preemptive actions triggered for interceptor, you don't get P2, right? This is according to the instruction. And then what about the timing of doing regen? Well, it's quite, this case for interceptor be straightforward. So it will be regen over here, and also the regen over here. Okay, guys, any questions regarding the action pattern for enemies? Any questions? Anybody? Okay, I hope that's clear. Robbie, okay. Robbie got a question here. Pass means the user type pass or the Starfighter passes by. Okay, so Robbie, pass over here really means in the acceptance test, so pass over here really means in the acceptance test, for example, somewhere the user simply say pass. So that's what we mean by pass. It doesn't really mean informally the Starfighter passes by. No, it doesn't mean that way. That means we passes the turn. All right. Okay. Good. Guys, any more questions related to enemy pattern? Okay. All right. All right. Having said this, I would like to move on to about scoring. Okay. Let me say a little bit more here. Remember from yesterday, at the end of AT011, right? Let me one more thing. One thing I didn't really say yesterday, which is important. Okay, you can refer to the iPad notes from yesterday. At the end, after the last command, right? Remember the conclusion was the ground at whatever location has been destroyed after collision with the Starfighter. And the Starfighter at the same time is also destroyed. But the most important thing is whenever an enemy is destroyed, either because they got collision with the Starfighter or because the enemy got collision with other entities that's other than Starfighter. As long as an enemy is destroyed. In that case, the enemy, depending on their type, is going to drop the so-called orbments. Is either an orb or focus. That's something I'll talk about, don't worry. And then since the enemy over here actually is destroyed, so it is going to drop a certain thing that can be picked up by the Starfighter. So that's why you can see the score over here is actually updated by from 0 to 2. So you can see over here, the score in the pre-state is actually 0. In the post-state, it has been increased to 2, right? So now, if you look at the PDF, it's actually quite, okay, I'll show it to you. Just for this one specifically, and then I'll give you a concrete example. If you go to, over here, 6.15, about the scoring. So at the end of each turn, you can think about after everything has been done, maybe even after enemy has spawned, or in that case, you want to keep track of all the enemies that have been destroyed in the current turn. So you can add those enemies or augments into the Starfighter. Okay, we'll talk about it in just a moment. So you can think of the score as an attribute for the Starfighter, and these are the definition about the various stuff. I'll give you an example. But for this particular, for AT011, because it was the grunt who actually got destroyed. So if you look at here, a grunt on destruction drops a silver orb with 2 points. You can see the 2 over here. So this is a very simple case in AT011. So that means after the grunt is destroyed, it's going to drop a silver orb 2 points. So that means the score is increased to 2. However, in general, for your program, you must handle something that's much more sophisticated or even recursive. So that's something I would like to talk about today. All right. First of all, any question regarding going from 0 to 2 conceptually? Any question about a simple case? I want to make sure you're okay just for this case here. Simple case. All right. Okay, seems to be okay. Okay, let me now talk about scoring in a more systematic way. All right. So now for the scoring, you have to think about, basically think about what we really want to keep updating will be the Starfighter's focus. Okay, think about the Starfighter's focus is like a tree, like a general tree, not like a binary tree. So for a binary tree, every node has at most 2 children. But for the general tree, it has as many as you like. Okay, but now actually we have a special tree. The tree we have at the top level, the number of children can be unlimited conceptually. So that means you only add the new child into the list whenever necessary, right? At the top level, it's unlimited. Okay. At the top level over here, the list over here is unlimited. You can also refer to your instruction. It's actually also set over there. Okay, and then for the children under the first, below the first level, the number of children can either be 3 or 4, either 3 or 4. Okay, the number of children at each level except the top level is 3 or 4. You might be wondering about why is that 3 or 4. It is because if you look at the instruction over here, if you look at a recursive case, so we say that a carrier, when they got destructed, they drop a diamond focus which has the capacity 4. So this is where the 4 comes from. And then when the pylon actually drops a focus, in that case, they're going to drop a focus of size 3. They can see the size is either 3 or 4. And then the Starfighter's focus is the top one that we talk about, which is unlimited, right? So now let's go back there. So now let's visualize this together. You can think about, for the carrier, when a particular carrier is destroyed, they're going to drop this particular focus over here, and then the first one is going to be an orb, like a base case. And then that one going there's called a gold orb with 3 points. Of course, you got to keep track of the points for every slot. And then in the case of pylon, it's going to be a focus of size 3 over here, like a deep blue versus light blue. So you can see the color I'm trying to put over here. And then in this case for the pylon, it's going to be filled in for the very first slot with a bronze orb with the 1 points, right? So these two are actually the recursive cases you have to deal with. What about base cases? For example, you can see for grunt, it's going to drop a silver orb. So it can either be gold, silver, or bronze, basically, right? So it can be 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point. In the case of silver orb, it's going to be worth 2 points. All right. Any questions so far? Just about the general concept about focus. You know, focus over here, and then it can be either 3 or 4, and then also you got base case and also recursive case, right? Oh, I see. Good question here, Amir. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet on purpose. When I say this carrier over here has actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. The size is 4. The multiplied by 3 over here is a multiplier. When if every slot is actually full, in that case, when you calculate the scores for the Starfighter, you have to multiply the score by 3. I'll illustrate this. But the multiply by 3, multiply by 2 here has nothing to do with the size of their focus. They only talk about when there's when the focus is full, how would you multiply the calculated score? Okay, I'll talk about it. Okay. All right, let's now talk about how you can calculate the score. What does the array contains? What array? You mean the array over here? The array basically contains ornaments. Basically, let me see where I can find the term. Basically, what you really need is, okay, maybe that's in the very beginning of the instruction, actually vocabulary, I think. You can think about either a list or basically a linear container. What you want to go to is the vocabulary. Let me just go there. Bear with me. Okay, you can think about it's going to be an array of ornaments. Okay, you can think about the focus is a container of ornaments, and each slot in the array is going to be either a focus recursively, or it's going to be an orb, the base case, right? Okay, let's now talk about how you can calculate the score. So you might be wondering, so what kind of data structure should we really use in order to represent this guy over here? You can see, well, I already gave you a hint. It's basically a tree structure, because the way you build the focus as a turn goes by for the game is going to be recursive. Okay, I'll talk about how you can add the components. Either you can add for example, when the ground is actually destroyed, you're going to add this into this particular Starfighter's focus. I'll talk about it. And also, for example, if a carrier is actually destroyed, in that case, you're going to add the carrier's focus into the Starfighter's focus. You only add something into the Starfighter's focus. You never add the Starfighter's focus to enemy's focus, not the other way around. All right. Let's see how we can calculate the score. Let's see. Okay. You can think about for every slot for the focus at every level over here, every slot is either a silver or a bronze or a maybe golden, right? I just use an acronym. S for silver, B for bronze, and also G for gold, right? It's either one of the base cases. If it's not one of the base cases, it's going to be just a focus, like a recursive case. In that case, it's simply just going to point to, you can think about another subtree over here, right? And this is pointing to just another subtree, all right? And then over here, you can see this, this particular subtree over here, you got the first slot being simply bronze, and the second one being gold, and the third one being just another focus. So recursively, we just go deeper over here, like this, right? You can think about it just the tree structure for the Starfighter's focus, which just keep growing as the enemies get destroyed, assuming that you got a very long game with many turns. Okay, so how do we calculate the score? The best way to think about it is go bottom up, okay? So you want to calculate something like this. Let me just, first of all, you can see silver, bronze is of 1 point, silver is 2. And also the gold is 3 points, right? Let me just write it down first, okay? And also bronze will be just 1 point, right? Silver will just be 2 points. And also gold will just be 3 points. Let me just put them down. These might just be attributes for individual objects, but I'll leave that as an implementation detail to you that you have to figure out, right? So now for every individual base case orb, we got its associated score, okay? So now we want to calculate bottom up. First of all, let's calculate for this particular one. So this one here, you can see this is basically some focus that's combined from some previous destructed carrier, right? And now currently you can see this, for this particular carrier's focus, every slot has been filled in, which means it is full. So this is what Amir was actually confused about. Why do you have multiplied by 3? So that means once you add up the score over here, which will be 5, 6, 8, you have to apply the multiplier 3. So that means you got 24. So 24 will be the score just for this particular focus. You only apply the multiplier if the focus you're talking about is full. Okay, so that's for this one here. Let's talk about this one here. What about this one here? This one here, it simply got 4. But now, do we have to apply the multiplier for this pylon focus? Do we need to? Apparently we don't, right? Because you can see it's not full. It's still got empty slot. So whether or not you want to apply the multiplier depends on whether the focus is full. Okay, so this is only 4. Okay, no multiplier. All right, so now how do you calculate the score for this particular focus, right? That one there is going to be basically, you can see 1 and 3 and also 24, right? So 4 and 28. So basically you got 28. And then since this particular focus is also full, so that means you're going to apply the multiplier. So 28 times 2, you got 56. So 56 will be the score for this particular focus. Okay? Recursion, yeah, for sure. Apparently that's recursion, right? I hope you realize that's the case, right? And then for this one here, it's going to, for this focus over here, 2 and 2, and then the score is 4, right, over here. So 8, and then do we apply the multiplier? We do, right? It's going to be A multiplied by 2, which will be 16, okay? So now we got 16, we got 56. So now we can calculate the top level. Okay, 2, 3, and then 59, 62, and also 62, 78. So 78 is basically the total score. And at the top level, we never apply the multiplier because it's never full. Conceptually, it's just unlimited. Okay, so now as question here, as soon as an enemy is killed or destroyed, it is added to the Starfighter's data structure for focus. Correct, that's spot on, exactly, yes. So guys, any conceptual question about how to calculate the score? I hope that's clear enough to you, but I still got more examples to show you, some scenarios. I'll pause here for a moment to see if anybody got any question. From Nina, do enemies keep their own scoring system? No, they don't. The only entity in the game that needs to have the score attribute will be just a Starfighter. So as I said, when this, so you never try to combine the Starfighter's focus into maybe, for example, the carrier's focus. You don't do that. Okay. The only score system you have to maintain will be for the Starfighter. Okay. Also, it's quite clear actually in the instruction. Right. You mean when should we add to the focus? You only add to the Starfighter's focus when the enemy is destroyed. Whenever the enemy an enemy is destroyed, either because of collision or whatever, you will just have to get to the have to combine. All right. How can the carrier's focus be filled? Okay, I'll talk about it. Give me a moment. F over here simply just focus. Focus is basically like a pointer to a subtree you can think of. And then B over here is simply an orb of type bronze. G is an orb of type gold. Okay, let me just go on a little bit. Maybe you're wondering about how we can actually get things to work. Let me give you some idea over here. Let's say this is the current focus, right, for the Starfighter. We already calculated its score in the previous page. Let's say in the current turn, let's say a ground is actually destroyed. Okay, let's say if a ground is destroyed, you can see a ground correspond to basically, let me use a special color over here. You can see a ground is going to, by definition, is going to drop a silver orb when it is destroyed. Basically, the way you're going to do it is by scanning through at the top level over here in the Starfighter's focus. And then you want to find the first free slot. However, you don't simply just go to this slot over here. No, you don't go there. Whenever you see a focus over here, that means you would have to recursively find out if there is any free slot over here. There is no free slot, but this is just another focus over here. So you got to see recursively if there's any free slot. If there is no, so that means you have to move on to the next slot at the top level, right? It's kind of recursive process. And now when we get to this particular focus over here, apparently if there's already an orb, you cannot replace it by, for example, the Gronk's orb over here. And then if this is a focus over here, you're just going to scan through. For example, this is already occupied. It's a focus. I need to search through recursively. Occupy. There we go. Now we got empty slot. Basically, from the previous turn, we got one spare slot for some pylons focus, basically. Okay, so after this, what we need to do, okay, let me just fix this. So because the ground drops some silver orb, so it's going to be S, right, for silver. So what we're going to do is we can think about we're going to fill in this particular silver over here. So that's going to be done here, right? So this is one scenario. Okay, any questions? So Nina, this kind of answer your previous question. How can a carrier or pylon's focus be filled? So you can see this is how we filled in, gradually, right? Very good. Okay, guys, I think you guys just need some visualization. Otherwise, I don't think algorithmically it's too difficult. If you already took a 2011, this shouldn't be too difficult. From Iman, can you also show an example where a carrier is destroyed? Of course, absolutely. How did you know? I wanted to show it. Yes. Let's see how we can do this. I would say the idea will be very similar. Okay, let me talk about two different cases for you. Okay, let me say this. Let's say we still start with this particular Starfighter's focus over here. Let's say we know that from the previous illustration, this will be the first free slot, right? You know what? Let me just show you two examples over here. Let me just duplicate this. Okay. So let me call this 3, and let me call this number 4. So you will have two different examples. Okay, so case number 1. Let's say this. Let's say we know that in this case, we know this is the first free slot. Let me just annotate it. Okay, so now how can we add? Let's say if the carrier is destroyed, it doesn't matter. If the pylon is destroyed, you do in a very similar way. So now if carrier is destroyed, what you're going to do is you're going to make a subtree over here, basically, right? So this free slot is now going to point to, so this is going to be a focus, right? And then that one there is simply just going to, let me just draw that, okay? So it's going to be a carrier, so it's going to be basically of size 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it's going to get a gold orb, so G over here. And then you can see, so these are the three free slots, 1, 2, and 3. So that's the result. So this is one case where the carrier is destroyed, and you simply add it to the very first free slot over there. Okay. Any question? Okay. Let me do another one. Okay. Let's say this. Let me say I kind of continue from. Let me just create a slightly different scenario. Okay. So in this case, we actually don't have that previous silver over here, right? You can see that's the case number 3, right? We simply just create a subtree over here. Let's now consider what if this particular first free slot was already occupied by the ground, let's say, and then how is the carrier going to be added? That's basically what I wanted to show. So now let's say this. We want to say the ground is destroyed. Let's say this, and then we know that it's going to add, so this is G, of course. So we're going to add the G over here, right? So now you can see, as far as this particular focus is concerned, you can see for this particular subtree over here, recursively no free slot. That's the resulting states, right? So now let's say I want to do, after this, let's say a carrier is actually is destroyed. Follow the orange step. So now what we want to do is we want to find out what's the free slot. Apparently, if you do this, if you do a similar scan, apparently you can see this one, base case, base case, base case. The focus recursively, this is already full as before, and base case, and this particular focus is also full as we just said. And now the first free slot should be over here. So you can see it's over here. So that means we're going to add the carrier's focus into this particular slot, right? So let me just draw that over here. So that means you're going to add this particular subtree over here, and then that'll be the carrier's focus 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to be a gold. And then these will be the free slots over here. All right, so that's about the scoring system I would like to talk about. Any more questions about the scoring system? Any questions about the scoring before I move on to the next item? Will be we should talk about AT015. Okay, that'll be the next item. All right, since everybody is okay. Okay, and to really handle this tree structure over here, you can build a tree yourself, which you did, in lab number 1 somehow, or maybe you want to look to see if there's any appropriate design pattern that maybe we cover in the course. You can definitely try that as well. But the bottom line idea should be you're building some recursive structure over here. That's the key, right? How you actually do the recursive structure is kind of up to you. All right. All right. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to talk about the AT15. All right. Okay, let's start with that. There will be 8 parts, and then for the first part, as we said yesterday, we're actually going to somehow play with the thresholds of the enemies. So you can see we got 40, 40, 40, 101, 101. As soon as you see this over here, you should really try to maybe set aside either in your mind or maybe on a piece of paper. I just do it on a piece of paper over here. So you can see the first one, 40, tells me I have a range going from 1 to 39, basically, right? 40 is kind of exclusive. And also we got the second one will be 40 to 40, and then 40 to 40, and then 40 to 101, and also 101 to 101. And then 101 to 101. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 different ranges. So the reason I'm doing this is I want to interpret about having set this parameter this way. How are the enemy spawning? How is enemy spawning process going to be proceeded? Going to be carried on, right? So now I can have a very precise interpretation. You can see, first of all, you can see this range is empty. This range is empty. This range is empty. And also, this range is empty. This is really important. When this range is empty, that means any number that's generated between 1 and 100, right? That's always the number we want to generate from the at the end of the term. Any number that's going to be generated from here will never fall into this particular empty range, right? So the consequence is an enemy is always spawned. It's a very important observation. Is always spawned. And the next question is, if an enemy is always spawned, what kind of enemy is that? Well, you just got to look at which threshold ranges are actually not empty, right? Apparently, you can see it's this one here and this one here. You can see for ground, if the number is in between 1 and 39, in that case, it's going to be a ground for the current term. If the number generated is between 40 and 100, in that case, it's going to be interceptor, basically, right? You can see you got you can think about between 1 and 39 and also between 40 and 100. So it's definitely much more likely to have an interceptor to be generated, right? More likely to spawn an interceptor. However, notice one thing here. As we talk about, for the random number generator you're given, you always, for the very first term, since you're always giving this particular parameter to the random number generator, for the very first 2 times, you're actually going to use the random number generator. So that means it will always give you 1 for the very first time. So this is actually covered in detail from yesterday. So that's something I can refer you to that. Also, you can look at the root class for the starter code, right? Okay, something I can leave to you. I don't need to repeat. All right, any question about this initial states? So now we have just entered the setup stage. We're not in the in-game stage just yet, not yet. Any question? So far, so good? All right. All right, let's now move on to part number 2, okay? Actually, part number 2, apparently that's very basic for you, right? I just want to mention again, depending on exactly what you have, you can see we are now currently already in the in-game states, which means we have to somehow summarize about the aggregation of all the attributes, right? For example, you can see for the health, for the energy, and for the regen, and etc. And I talked about yesterday about how you can combine those attributes. You got to look up to see exactly which option have been chosen for the engine, for the armor, for the power, and also for the weapon, right, etc. And don't forget, always you start with the maximum health, and also start with the maximum energy. All right, so nothing else I need to mention. Everything has been covered also yesterday. Okay, any question about this stage over here before we move on to the actual game? Okay, everybody's okay? All right. Let's now move on to part number 3. Okay, for part number 3, you can, again, the convention is I always show the pre-states, the command that we run by the user, and also the resulting the post-states, right? We talk about pre-state and post-state in the ETF lecture. Okay, so let's now talk about the first one. So first of all, we talk about pass. And remember we said previously, let me just go back to here. Remember we said the ground should be triggered by pass, right? Just remember that. However, at the moment, we don't have any ground just yet. So nothing will happen. Just remember, right? Only if you got any ground, will there be any triggering action. If there's no enemy, there'll be no enemy action, right? Let me just move this particular slide a little bit forward so that will help me refer to it. Okay, so we can keep referring to this particular one. let me put it maybe here. Okay, so now let's talk about the first one. So basically you can think about the phase number 1 and phase number 2 is about the movement for the projectiles, friendly projectiles and then the enemy projectiles. But currently, nothing, right? Only the Starfighter is over here lonely. So that means this phase over here, it will be as if it's like a skip, doing nothing, right? But later on, it will be something happening. And then remember we said yesterday, you have to do energy regen before you do any action. In this case, even for pass, you will have to do some energy regen. Let's talk about this. And then, first of all, when you do regen, you can see that over here in the pre-states, the health and also the energy, they are already the maximum. So that means when you apply the health regen, which is 1, or when you apply the energy regen, which is 3, they will have no effects because the energy and the health are already their maximum, right? Remember, that's something we covered yesterday. But now this here will be the more interesting bits, right? How exactly is the pass going to happen? That will be very important. Okay, so let me read the instruction together with you. If you go to the instruction there, okay, let me just go to the Starfighter. So if you go to the Starfighters Act over here, 6.13.3, and let's see what's going to happen for pass. For the pass, it's going to happen this way. Apply regeneration twice, and then the Starfighter does not do anything, right? You can think about, we already did 1 regen. That's the common regen we always have to do, regardless of any the current command, either being fire, pass, or move. But now, for pass specifically, we need to apply another 2 regens, right? You can see the difference here. So now, so that's why I put over here, you can see in the output state over here, we say Starfighter action over here. The Starfighter passes, okay, and then doubling regen rates. So this is basically what we meant by apply the regeneration twice. So now you can see the regeneration used to be 1.3 over here. If you double the rate, it's going to be 2.6 conceptually, right? So you can think about what we're really trying to do is we have some initial regen that always has to be done, which will be 1 and 3. And then we also have the double regen. And this is due to the current command being passed. And that one there will be 2 and then 6. However, since the current health and energy are already their maximum, so applying either of them will just have no effects. That's why you still got 70 and 70. Right? Makes sense, hopefully. Okay, so after this, we're going to have the enemies act, but you can see no enemy there, nothing. So this will be as if we say do nothing. And then we're going to do the final phase, phase number 7. It will be the enemy to spawn the enemy. So now the enemy spawn, it happens to generate the grunt in this case, right? Again, let me emphasize, always for the very first time you got any enemy generate for the very first turn, right? You can see the location. So this is at the end of the first turn. So always the first row. The location should always be the first row and second column. Last column. Okay, it's due to the special property that we'll talk about the random number generator. Okay, let me say this. This is the property about if there is any at the end of the first turn. Okay, let me just say one more thing. If any enemy generated, in that case, it's going to be always in the first row and also last column. All right, always the last column for sure, but it's also the first row because of the random number generator we're using just for the first time. All right. Any question about part number 3? Any question? We haven't got any interactions just yet, but I think you already see something new from yesterday, right? You can see when you try to pass, you have to double the regen rates internally. But in the case where you already got maximum, you just wouldn't have any effects. All right. All right, so let me move on to part number 4. So what about part number 4? So for part number 4, we are basically trying to do another pass. So the interesting thing about AT015, you're trying to do 5 passes. Okay, we're going to see. Okay, and one thing you should know is, remember in the previous turn, we actually spawned a grunt. Oh, actually, the grunt is over here. I forgot. Okay, this is a pre-state, right? The grunt. And remember, the grunt is actually going to be preempted by a pass, right? That's something you have to know. I don't think we got any pass yesterday, so we never saw any preemptive action for the grunt, but we'll see that today. So it's nice to make things complete. Okay, so let's talk about just follow the step one by one. So this will be interesting. Starting point to be interesting. So number 1, we're going to do basically over here, we're going to go over the let the projectiles move first. But currently, no projectile, right? You can see over here, no projectile, so nothing to do. Okay, but it will be maybe later. And then we're going to do as normal. We're going to do energy regen, also health regen for the Starfighter before we do the pass, right? Before we do the pass, and you can see it's already a maximum 70-70. So doing regen 1 and 3 should have no effects. So they remain to be 70 and 70, right? And then when we do a pass, it's going to double the regeneration rate. You can see the output from here, and as if we apply 2 and 6. But applying 2 and 6 to the maximum will still have no effects, right? So it's the same. It's pretty much like before, okay? Okay, so now the interesting bit will be about the grunt, the enemy. Let me remind you very quickly. Okay, let me just get that page back. Okay, give me a moment. I want to see over here. Okay, let's now see this. Remember the description we saw before. For the grunt, basically it's either we got preemptive action and then followed by P2, right? Or we simply just don't have any preemptive action. But now in this case, since it's a pass, so that means we're going to do phase 1 followed by phase 2. Let's kind of predict what's going to happen. For phase number 1, for the preemptive action, you're basically going to increase both the current health. Let me highlight it for you. You're going to increase both the current health and also the total health by 10. So that will be the preemptive action. Okay? And then after this is not going to end the turn. And if not, that's not going to end the turn. It depends on, for the phase number 2, it depends on whether the Starfighter can be seen by the enemy. But in this case, they are too far away, so they cannot. Starfighter cannot be seen. In that case, we're going to move 2 spaces left, which we did yesterday, actually. And also, if this ground is still on the board, in that case, we're going to fire a projectile, enemy projectile specifically, and then directly to the left, right? So just get a sense about what's going to happen for P1 and P2, right? So now let's go back to the actual board. Let's now try to rehearse what's going to happen. So you can see the G, first of all, is going to, the preemptive action is going to increase the current health and also total health by 10. So what's going to happen is, you can see for the enemy, first of all, you can see an enemy over here, projectile, oh, sorry, not here, over here. Notice one thing. I want to show to you very clearly over here. When you see the enemy action over here, so there are actually 2 phases over here. You can see I said this is phase number 1, and this is phase number 2. That's why I use 2 different blues to show you. For phase number 1, we are actually going to gain the 10 total health. So this is basically the preemptive action we have to do. So what you're going to see is, you can see for the grunt in the pre-states, used to be 100 and 100, right? For the health and also energy. So they have just become 110 and also 110, right? You can see this is the part about the preemptive action. Okay, number 1. And then after this particular preemptive action, because grunt is the only enemy that's on the board, so we have to think about, and also it does not end the turn, so we got to do phase number 2. So now when we do phase number 2, well, so you can think about this part over here is phase number 2. It's going to move to the left by 2 spaces. So you can think about G over here is going to move to 1 and 2. It's going to move to here and so also fire a enemy projectile to the left, right? So that's exactly what you will see over here in the post states, okay? Oh, one thing I forgot to mention over here. So when do we apply the regen to this case over here for the grunt, right? As we said before, in case you got both phase 1 and phase 2 are present, you have to apply the regen in the beginning of the non-preemptive action. But now in this case, it doesn't make an effect, but I just want to tell you how you would do it. So now in the beginning of the phase number 2 for the grunt over here, you can see currently their current health and that's their health, current health over here. Yeah, that's a health, sorry. That's a current health over here. And now what happens if we apply the regen? What's the regen number? Because the regen is simply just 1. Applying 1 to over here to the current health has no effects because it's already a maximum. So no effects. Because 110 already the maximum. Right? So you can see there are basically 2 regens we are trying to do in this turn. One regen is really a result of the preemptive action. The second regen is the normal regen we have to do in the beginning of the phase 2. Okay? All right, so that's about it. And then after this particular second phase over here, and now we're going to go to the enemy spawn, right? So now for the enemy spawn, in this case, we simply spawned basically just another grunt at this particular location over here, just happened to be, right? So you can see this is just another grunt. So this is a new grunt. All right, so now let's see this. Okay, so enemy energy, okay, so Amir, be careful. Enemy does not have any energy. They only got health, right? You can see over here for the attributes, you can see you only got health, you got regen, you got armor, you got vision, there's no energy, okay? And then there is, be careful here, I think there's some special cases in the instruction, but what I'm trying to say is, whenever you try to apply the regen of the health for the enemy, if the current value for the health for the enemy is already the maximum, in that case, applying any amount of regen is not going to have effects, okay? Be careful. Okay, any more question about part number 4 before I move on? Okay, you can see today actually it's interesting because for AT015 we're kind of seeing a different kinds of movement, like a proceeding of the game. All right, let's now move on to part number 5. Okay, so for part number 5. What we want to do is we want to do just another pass, right? As I told you, we got actually 5 passes to do before a fire. So let's just bear with the procedure, right? Let's say we now want to do just another pass. And we'll start with the movement of the Starfighter, okay? The first one. And we do have a Starfighter over here, enemy Starfighter, okay? And then according to their specification, they're going to move to the left by 4. You can also confirm that in the instruction, okay? What's going to happen is this particular guy is going to 1, 2, 3, 4. Is going to move to over here, right? That's why you will see that it has moved to over here. Okay, so that's about the projectile's move. And then let's look at the information here. You can see under the projectile, you simply got this particular one has been moved to F20. And also for the enemy projectile action, you actually show that move from 27 to 23, right? That's easy. Okay, so that's about the projectile movement, specifically enemy projectiles phase. We don't have any friendly projectile just yet. All right, and then we're now going to go for the Starfighter's action. And now, since we want to do, basically, we want to do a pass. Okay, it's a pass over here. We want to do a pass, and don't forget, you always have to do regen. Excuse me. We always have to do a regen. So now, if we want to do the regen, notice that the current health and also energy, again, is a maximum. If you just do the regen 1 and 3, no effects. That's why you got 70 and 70. And remember, for the pass, we're just going to apply another 2 regens. which will be doubling the regen rates, right? We already showed you this output from the previous step. So now for this one here, it will be as if we just apply another 2 and 6, and no effects to 17 and 17, which are the maximum health and energy already. All right. So for this part here, it's also easy. We have seen that already. So now what we want to see will be about the enemies. And notice that currently we got 2 enemies on the board, right? Of the same kind, fortunately. So now you can see we got the grunt over here. We also got a grunt over here. So now remember, the preemptive action is to really increase the maximum health and also the current health by 10. And now we want to do this for these 2 enemies, right? So now let's take a look at the output here for enemy action. I think for AT015, you want to pay more attention to the enemy action section over here, right? First of all, of course, I already colored them to show you the different phases. But when you look at your message, when you look at your acceptance test, you want to really have a conceptual grouping over here. So the first 2 over here, we are saying that for these 2 grunts with ID 1 and with ID 2, we're going to do their preemptive action by increasing their total health and current health by 10. So that will be phase number 1. And then, of course, we do the phase number 2. And then for the phase number 2, for each one of them, so we're going to, for phase 1 and phase 2, we always go by the ID number. So for phase number 1, go with ID number 1, and then go with ID number 2. For phase number 2, you also go with ID number 1, go with ID number 2. Okay? So now let's see this. Let's go phase by phase. What about for phase 1? That means you're going to increase the health. So what you're going to see is, let me just show you here. You can see in the pre-states, these 2 are the grunts. So they got 110, 110, 100, 100, right? So now increase, you will become 120, 120, and 110, and 110. Okay, hopefully you can see that, right? So that makes sense. Okay, hopefully everybody is okay up to now. And then after this, so we have done phase 1 for the grunt. So let's now go to phase 2. Because the preemptive action for both grunts do not end their current turn. So we got to do phase 2. So now for phase number 2, for each grunt, before they do their phase 2, you have to apply the regen for each one of them, right? So that's why I put an arrow over here. The first arrow goes right before this grunt does its phase 2. The second arrow over here for the regen goes right before the second grunt does their phase number 2, right? And for each one of them, they're simply just going to move to the left, right, as before. So now remember this enemy. Let me just go back here. Remember this enemy is already gone, right? It has already moved to here. So now we're going to move, first of all, this particular, we're going to move ID by ID. You can check the ID. So this grunt is with ID 1. This one here, which is comes later from the last spawning. So this will be with ID 2. So we're going to move this one to the left by 2 position. And also move this to over here by 2 position, right? So that's why you will see over here, you got this grunt over here, you got this grunt over here. All right? And after the movement, also we have to fire for each one of them an enemy projectile to the left. So you can see 1 enemy projectile and also 1 enemy projectile. And also you want to make sure that your output states, your abstract states, also shows them. Let's go over them. You can see for the first one, an enemy projectile with ID -2 spawns at location A25. So we are talking about this particular enemy projectile. And then for this one here, you can see ID -3 spawn at location A27. So this is the enemy projectile we are talking about. And also you can see these 2 are also listed under the projectile section just to tell what's their attributes, you know, for example, damage, and also the move, and also the location, etc. Right? All right, so now after this particular phase 1 and phase 2 for the 2 grunts, we're now going to spawn the enemy, right? The phase number 7. And now in this case, a random number generator generates a number so that it's going to generate an interceptor. Right, so now we are having, so starting from the next turn, we're going to have basically 2 kinds of enemies on the board. So now we got our 2 existing grunts over here, and also this new interceptor has been generated. You can see under the enemy section over here, you can see here, we got a new enemy. And then it says that it's at location H30, which is exactly over here. Okay. Enemy movement is teleport, not for the ground. I don't think so. So I think only specific enemies will actually move teleport. You got to check it, not for the ground. And also, you got to check for that. Yeah, it does not apply to our particular example here. So what Amir was bringing up is valid. So whenever you're trying to move your enemy, you want to refer to the instruction very carefully. We basically distinguish between two kinds of movement, right? I just want to mention to you very quickly. So when you talk about the enemy movements, okay? So there are two kinds. Either, let's say, travel. So travel is basically the same as a Starfighter, which means you can move basically vertically, horizontally in whatever way you like, but it's like a discrete move. On the other hand, you also got teleports. So teleport basically means that you go from the source location directly to the target location. And for travel, from the source to the target, you also have to include all the intermediate spaces, right? So hopefully you can see the difference. But check the instruction for which kind of enemy should really move by teleport and which one should be using travel. Okay. All right. So any more question about part 5? Any more? All right. All right. So let's now move on to part number 6. Just another pass, and then this time I would say mostly the same interaction, but we just have some maybe collision happening. Well, let's just go over that. We got 3 more states to show. Okay, hopefully we can finish by 5:30. Okay. Okay, so now as usual, we're gonna see one by one. We're just going to see this. First of all, we're gonna move the projectiles. So now you can see all the projectiles we got are enemy projectile. So we don't have any friendly projectile just yet. Okay, we're gonna move by the ID. So -1, -2, -3. Think about this one here is -1, -2, and also -3. The latest one has this particular ID, right? Okay, so now we're gonna move them, and they're going to individually move to the left by 4 units, right? For example, for this one here, it's going to move to 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to move to over here, right? So now it's gone. And for this one here, it's going to move to 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to move to over here. So this one is gone. And what about this guy over here? Well, apparently it wants to move to 1, 2, 3, 4 to over here. However, it will collide with a ground, right? We have seen some similar scenario yesterday, right? That's just, you should just have some idea, right? So now we already simulate what's going to happen. Let's see exactly on the board. First of all, you can see these 2 enemy projectile have done their move. And you can see the third one, actually the one with the ID -3, is actually gone. Because over here you can see we only got the enemy projectile with a -1 and -2. -3 projectile actually got destroyed already. Okay. Should you actually when the enemy projectile is actually destroyed or destroyed, should you update the focus for the Starfighter? The scoring, yes or no? Guys, it's a quiz question. No. Okay, Amir, thank you. Apparently no, right? You only try to update the scoring for the Starfighter if it's an enemy got destroyed, not enemy projectile. So just in case you got confused. All right, so now let's continue. So that's about the, also you can see over here, so now this will be valuable. You can see for the previous 2, they simply just got their movement. And then for another enemy projectile, notice one thing here. It is supposed to, you can see from the previous 2, 23 to 19, 4 units. 25 to 21, 4 units. But now we only got from 27 to 26, only 1 unit, not 4, right? Notice this. This is the point of collision. That's important to note. And then it will collide with a ground. So that's the ground we're talking about over here, right? at location A26, exactly over here, and then healing 15 damage. Basically, you can think about this particular enemy projectile with ID -3 got damage 15 over here. We are supposed to add the 15 to the energy of this particular enemy. However, you can see it's already its maximum, so it will be no effects. So Amir, I suppose you meant, since for this particular enemy projectile, it is supposed to move 1, 2, 3, 4. It's supposed to move to over here. However, you already got destroyed over here. That's why it does not continue. I suppose that's what you're wondering about. No, it does not. As soon as the you can think about any entity where they want to travel to a particular target location. They don't necessarily always make it to that target location. They might simply got destroyed due to collision on halfway through. We remember the very last stage from yesterday for AT011. Remember the Starfighter, it is supposed to move from, I remember, from A1 to A10. However, it already got destroyed at A9 after several collisions. So that's why the final location for the Starfighter is actually not a target location, right? So that's something we already said about yesterday. All right, so now that's about the projectile. Okay, I don't think I have missed anything. Okay, that's about it. And there's a collision for sure. Let's now talk about, let's continue to talk about, let's say, energy regen. So this one will be the same for the Starfighter. So now for the regen, we're just going to see maximum health, maximum energy, applying regen will have no effects, right? But since we talk about the pass, so we're going to also double the regen rates, and we also talk about this a few times already. So now it would be as if we apply 2 and 6, right? You can see 2 and 6 is simply doubling 1 and 3, and that also has no effects. So that's why we got 70 and 70, right? So that is about the Starfighter's action. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see about the enemy action. And now we actually got both the grunt and also the interceptor, right? So now we got both. And remember the current one is actually the pass, right? So now you have to be very careful over here, right? The current command is actually pass. So that means for the grunt, it's going to be preempted. So this, for the grunt, it's going to be phase 1 followed by phase 2, right? And also for the interceptor, it's not going to be preempted. Intercepted will only be preempted by fire, not by pass. So that means it's not going to have P1, but just going to have P2. So this is why when you output, you're going to output for phase 1 first, and also get an output for phase 2 the next. So now if you look at the output, the enemy action over here, you can see for the phase number 1, we simply got the grunt, right? Doing their preemptive action. So what are they? You will simply just increase their total health and current health by 10. So what's going to happen is you can see we got 2 grunts over here. We got these 2 grunts, 120, 120, 110, 110. So now after increasing by 10, we got 130, 130, 120, 120, right? So that's a preemptive action. So now we go to phase number 2. And for phase number 2, what should be the order of doing phase number 2, right? You can see you got phase number 2 for the grunt and also phase number 2 for the interceptor. Go with the ID. So that's why you will see over here for phase number 2, we go with ID 1, 2, and also 3. All right. For the grunt, we are simply just going to move them by 2 units to the left and also fire the projectile, right? It's going to be, this particular guy is going to move to 1, 2, go to here and fire the projectile. And for this guy over here, it's going to move 1, 2, is going to move to here and also fire the projectile, right? Oh, sorry, I drew the wrong symbol. It should be the enemy projectile, not friendly, right? That's why you will see over here. So that will be the 2 grunt after the movement and also after firing the 2 enemy projectiles. Okay, and then also you can confirm that by having the looking at the output messages. All right, so that's about the enemy actions. Okay. Oh, and also one thing again, even though I didn't mention, but I should also do it. You can see you got 3 arrows over here for the regen, right? You can think about we got 2 grunts and 1 interceptor, right? Remember we got 3 enemies over here. We got 2. Oh, sorry. Let me just circle it again. We got 2 grunts and also we got interceptor. So all of them are going to do phase 2 in this case. So that means before the phase 2 of this particular grunt, we have to do regen. Before the phase 2 of this particular grunt, we have to do regen. And also before the phase 2 of this particular grunt, for this interceptor, we also need to do regen. However, it will have no effects in this case because you can see for every one of them, their health level is already the maximum. So applying regen has no effects in this case, right? So applying the regen over here, oh, notice that for the interceptor, regen is simply 0. So it always has no effect, just for your information. All right, so after this particular regen and X for the enemy, so now we're going to go to the last stage, which would be the spawning of the enemy. So now in this case, you can see the only one we spawned will be just over here. Just that. Okay. Actually, the one for the phase number 2 for the grunt, let me for the interceptor, let me just review very quickly. You can see for let me just go to that particular one over here. For phase number 2 of the interceptor, you have to move 3 spaces to the left, right? I'm just reminding you. So now what does that mean? If I go back there, over here, you can see the interceptor used to be here. So now after the phase 2 movement, you're going to move 3 spaces to the left. So 1, 2, and 3. So this is the place, right? That's why you see over here. So that's something I forgot to mention. All right. One question from Philip. If we get more than 11 test cases to pass for phase 1, is it assumed that our game is fully implemented? Not necessarily. So basically for phase number 1, we only test you with only the 15 test cases we gave to you. But passing those 15 doesn't guarantee you're fully implemented because there are many other scenarios which are not covered by the 15 test cases, which we will test you in phase number 2. Phase 1 worth 2% imply that the design document is worth? No. Yeah, so I thought it's already clear. You should really look at the syllabus. If you look at the syllabus over here, right, there's something that's already being fixed since the beginning of the semester. If you go to the grading scheme, okay, phase 1, 2%, and phase 2, software, 18%. Design documents, 10%. Philip, does that clarify for your concern?
Yeah, so basically phase 2 software, that 18% are the additional tests that you're going to run, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for asking. Good, no problem. Yeah, so you can think about the 2% as long as you can pass according to the grading scheme. Like Philip said, if you can pass 11 or more, you can get a 2%. Again, the main intention for this is really just to push you to get the basic done as soon as you can. And then for the 18% over here, how can you get 18% as many as possible? You should really write your own test cases to really match the Oracle. Okay, and then the 10% is about design documents. Since your phase number 1 is due next Wednesday, I will try to give you the instructions before the due dates next week, before your phase 2 starts. Okay. All right. So
I have another quick question.
Yes.
Would when we're writing our own test cases, would it kind of be ideal to kind of try to make our program crash in a sense, so that we kind of cover all possible scenarios?
Yeah, actually, Philip, I think you're right. Yes, you're trying to play the adversary's role. Basically, you're trying to, you definitely try to crash your program. If you try very hard to crash your program, but your program never crashes, in that case, that could be like extra assurance about the correctness. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Basically, try as many test cases, scenario as you can possibly think of. Number one, they don't crash. Number two, they always match the output as generated by the oracle. So that can give you definitely some very good confidence for sure. All right. All right, so that's about part number 6. Okay, we got about 10 minutes. Let's finish 2 parts, okay? Let's try to finish in time. Okay, part number 7, another pass. Okay, so from the previous one, we like this, you can see the state is growing larger and larger. So sorry about the font size. So when you actually, if you want to look at the notes, if you zoom in, I think the resolution is pretty good, so you don't have to worry, right? I'll try to zoom in if necessary. Okay, so now the sequence we're going to follow will still be, we want to do, first of all, we want to do projectiles. Okay, so now let's see what's going to happen. It's very similar. Okay, so now we actually got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4 projectiles, enemy projectiles more specifically. So now we want to move all of them to the left by 4 units. You can think about this guy here is going to move to 1, 2, 3, 4. Gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be over here. I'll just draw it over here. And then this one is also gone. However, for this last guy over here with the ID -5, with this guy here, is going to collide with a ground, right? It's a very similar pattern as the previous one, right? So let me just mention here. You can see, so that for that particular guy with -5, you can see will collide with the ground. In that case, it's going to heal its damage, which is 15. You remember we got 15 over here, right? However, that 15 is not going to make any difference because for the ground, they already got their, it's actually the ground with the ID 1. Okay, let me just go there. You can see the ground with ID 1 already got their energy, their health being the maximum. So it will have no effects when you heal the damage. All right. Okay, so now I already also make some notes over here. You can also take a look. Okay, so that's about the projectiles movement, right? We're done with this part. So what about for the Starfighter, right? We have done this many times. Let's do it anyway for completeness. We're gonna do regen before we do the pass. So when we do the regen, again, you can see maximum, no effects when we do the regen, right? And now when you want to do the pass, remember we're going to basically apply another regen twice. So it's going to be as if, since currently it's simply 1, 3, double will be 2, 6. But again, no effects on 70, 70. But you should really still implement it in your code just in case it can make a difference. All right. So that's about the Starfighter. So I think this part is also done. Let's now talk about the enemy, right? Again, we got ground and we got interceptor, right? So now the pattern will be very similar to, so you can see the current one is simply just a pass. So the ground is going to get P1 and P2. Interceptor is going to get P2 only, right? Similar, okay? So now if you look at the enemy action section over here, you can see for phase number 1, we simply apply the preemptive action to the 3 grounds with ID 1, 2, and 4, all right? Why is there no 3? Because that ID 3 has been taken by the interceptor. That's why, okay, just in case you're wondering. Okay, and then if you want to apply the preemptive action, so for those 1, 2, and 4, okay, let me just show you here. You can see for 1, 2, and 4, you got 130, 130, 120, 120, 100, 100, right? So now after that, it's going to become 140, 140, 130, 130, 110, and 110. Okay, that's a preemptive action. And then after that, we're actually now going to do phase number 2. So now you want to be careful here. So something I remember was Manor who actually asked me earlier today. So maybe this is time to point it out. When you actually look at this particular case over here, you can see we got ground, ground, ground. And also ground with ID 1 appear twice, right? You can see it's 1, 2, 4, and then 3. So it's not completely sorted, right? If you look at all the numbers together, they are not completely sorted. So that's not the right way to look at it. You should really look at it this way. When you actually got the ground, it's going to do phase 1. So only those enemies which will do phase 1, in this case, only the ground, they should be output, their output should be sorted according to the ID first. and then you will do the subsequent output for those enemy which will do phase 2. In that case, you're going to sort them by their IDs. All right. Okay, so Manor, if you're here, so that's basically the clarification to your concern. Okay, and then so now we got basically over here. So we got phase number 1 for the ground. We already talked about it. So now for phase number 2, we are basically going to do for the phase number 2, and for phase number 2, for the ground is going to basically move by 2 units and then fire the enemy stuff, the enemy projectile. And then for the interceptor is actually going to also going to move to the left by 3 units, right? That's already something we did. Okay, so now let's take a look for each one of them. And don't forget, before each one of them, right, remember this pattern over here. Okay? This pattern is really important. So now for the ground, we're going to apply their regen right before phase number 2. And for the interceptor, we're also going to apply their regen right before phase number 2, right? So now let's try that. So now think about, well, let me talk about regen. For the regen, it's just going, for example, for the ground, you will have no effects because for each one of them, their health is already the maximum. So there'll be no effects. So what about the interceptor? And for the interceptor, guess what? It also has no effects because the regen is simply just 0, no effects. All right. Okay, after this, we are just going to look at I'll just simulate the movement together with you quickly. So now we're gonna go by the ID. You can think about this is the this is 1, this is 2, and this is 4, and this is 3, I believe, right? So we're gonna go with this particular order. So now this one here is going to move to the left by two positions, 1 and 2. So it's going to be here and then fire some projectile. And then for number 2, so this one is gone. It's going to move by 2 positions. So it's going to be G over here and then fire the projectile over here. You can see what I'm doing here. And then this one here is going to 1, 2, move to over here and then fire the projectile over here, right? So that's why you will see in the output states, you got exactly this, and also this, all right? So what about the interceptor? It's also going to move by 3 units, and there's no collision, so you can make it to the final target location. So that's why you will see that over here, the interceptor was here, so you're gonna move 1, 2, and 3, going to move to here, and then gone. So that's why you will see over here, all right? So finally, we're going to do also the enemy spawning. In that case, it just happened that we're going to spawn another interceptor over here, right? That's kind of make things more interesting. So now we got 3 grounds and 2 interceptors on the board, right? All right, any question about part number 7? Any question? Everybody okay? All right, let's now do the final part, okay? I might be running maybe a few minutes over, but let's finish the final part, okay? So now for the final part, basically, you can see the state growing very large. What we're going to do is still going to follow the normal procedure. So we are just going to basically, number 1, we're going to do the projectile movement. Okay, so now for this part here, I can just point to you. I don't need to simulate anymore. We have done that many times. For the projectile, we're going to move all these projectile, all of them. And then notice that one of them is going to collide with the ground. And then we're going to heal 15 damage. We talk about it simply has no effects, right? And then these will be the final location for the projectile. So if you don't mind, I'm going to skip just the projectile part since we talk about them many times. Okay, and then we now move on to also the Starfighter. And now this time it's not pass anymore. It's actually a fire. Oh, sorry. It's actually a fire over here. So how do we do a fire? So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to do regen. But it's simply just maximum, so it will have no effects. And then since we're going to do a fire, so we're gonna subtract the projectile's firing cost from the energy of the Starfighter. So what we're gonna do is, you can see over here, according to the weapon type, you can see projectile pattern over here is the standard. And then you can see the cost will simply just be 5. So that's why the math should be the 70 over here subtract 5. So that will just give you, that will simply just give you 65, right? You can see I simply got the notes for you. For the regen, no effects. So, and then you will do the firing. Notice one thing, guys. I think I mentioned about this before. So the sequence over here is really important. You don't do the firing and then the regen, in which case you will get a larger number. You do the regen, which has no effects, and then you do the firing, which will give you 65. It's really important to notice. Okay, so that will be 65. Okay, just point out to you. So that's about also you can see the projectile is also fire, right? You can see the projectile right to the immediate right to the Starfighter. It's a standard one. Okay, so the pink one are simply this firing operation. Okay, I think that's also straightforward. Let's now take a look at what's going to happen for the ground and also the interceptor. Let's now have a look. Since now it's actually a different command, so let's now outline what's going to happen for enemy. Okay. So now for the enemy action, since now we actually got fire, and according to what we said previously, let me just show you once more, just to be precise. Let me find out where that paragraph is. It's exactly over here, so I'll put it here. So now currently it's a fire, right? You can see currently it's a fire. So that means for the fire, for the interceptor, is just going to do the preemptive action and then end the turn. And for the ground, for the fire, it's not going to trigger any preemptive action. So it's going to be P2. So P1 and P2. All right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now what's going to happen is, let's now for the fire, so now we got to talk about for the ground and also for the interceptor. For the ground, it's not going to be triggered by any preemptive action. So now it's going to be P2 only. And for the interceptor, it's just going to be P1, the preemptive action. And we'll look at that in just a moment. And what should be the timing of applying the regen? This should be the regen, and this should be the regen, right? For every one of them, right? And since currently the regen is simply just already the maximum, so we actually don't do anything. So it wouldn't change anything, right? And also for the interceptor, the regen value is simply just 0, also has no effects, right? Just by definition. All right, so now let's talk about a little bit more detail. If you look at the enemy action section over here, right? You can see we got phase 1 over here just by the interceptor, right? That's what we said previously, just the interceptor doing phase 1. And then we're going to do it by the ID. So ID 3 followed by ID 5. And then when we do the phase number 2, because both of the interceptor, after they have done phase 1, they already end the turn, so they don't have any phase 2. So we only do the phase 2 for the ground. In that case, we got to do for the 3 grounds over here, ID 1, ID 2, and ID 4. Okay, so let's now talk about phase 1. We haven't done any preemptive actions for interceptor just yet. Let's talk about it. Let's go back here. So you can see, according to your instruction over there, you can see for the interceptor, for preemptive action. So there are basically 2 cases you have to do, right? Once it's triggered by the fire. If the interceptor and the Starfighter are in different columns, that's actually this case. Why? Let's come back here. You can see over here, the Starfighter is over here, right? You can see, well, it's actually quite obvious. The Starfighter is in this particular, let me just read it again. Different column, that's even easier. You can see this is the column for the Starfighter. None of the interceptor are there, right? So that means you will have to, what do you have to do? You will actually try to move to the row that the Starfighter is in for the interceptor, right? Let's see how we can do that. Let me just make it this larger for you. You can see, first of all, for the preemptive action for this and this interceptor, they are not in the same column as the Starfighter. They are not. So we're going to move them, each one of them, to the row. You can see this is the row of the Starfighter. So for this one here, you're going to move that to here. And for this one here, you're going to move that to here. And we are lucky because in this case, there's no collision. But in general, there might be some collision along the way. So you're going to see the case number 2, right? So that's something you will have to see. I mean, actually, for both cases, you might have some collision, but in the acceptance test 15, you don't have that. So we're going to move this to this particular, let me just write it down quickly. You're going to move this to over here. Also, you're going to move this to over here. That's basically what you have to do, right? So that's why you will see that over here. So now they are in the same row as the Starfighter. That's the preemptive action you're basically saying. So now they're in the same row. So that's about phase number 1. And then for phase number 2, as I said before, you definitely have to apply the regen before the action for both the grounds and also the intersector, but they just have no effects. And now it'll be very important for you to see this, right? Again, see the ID. I think, actually, Manor, I think that's exactly a scenario we were talking about earlier today. So now if you look at the ID over here, if you simply look at it without any coloring, without any grouping, you will see we're doing 3, 5, 1, 2, 4. You might think they are simply not sorted, right? They are not sorted if you combine the two phases together, but they should be sorted individually for different phases, for each phase. So now, for phase number 1, they are sorted, 3 followed by 5. And for phase number 2, 1, 2, and 4. So they are sorted. So that's really important to realize. Okay, so now for the ground, we're simply just going to move them. So you can think about, so we got 3 grounds, basically 1, 2, and 3. We got 3 grounds. We are simply just going to move them. So we're going to move this ground over here to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be here. Is it? I forgot. It's sorry, only 2 spaces. I just confused myself. Beg your pardon. You're going to move to the left by 2 spaces. So the first one is going to move to over here, and also the second one is going to move to over here, and etc. Right? So that's exactly what you will see over here. All right. So now you can also see over here by the moves over here. So you also record it down. Right? That's always the message you want to make sure you print it out properly. And also for each one of them, well, after the movement, you also fire the enemy projectile over here to the left. Right? Okay, so that's about the enemy actions. And the most important point is you have to make sure for every enemy action section over here, you have to distinguish between those which will do phase 1 and those which will do phase 2. That's the important part. You want to that's we get from studying this acceptance test today. The final phase we want to look at will be the enemy spawned over here. That's the final one. And for the enemy spawned, we happen to spawn just another interceptor over here. You can see that's actually recorded over here. And also natural enemy spawned. So that's just another one. So that's in F20, which is exactly over here. All right. So guys, I think that's about the A parts for AT015, right? I hope that's clear to you about the big picture. Let's now read some questions from Manor. Because the preemptive action for interceptor involves movement, we show interceptor move action first in phase 1, yes, and then the other enemies for phase 2. Okay, let me just clarify once more. It's really important. You can see that number 1, the current command by the user is fire, right? Fire will trigger, by definition, fire will only trigger the interceptor for their preemptive action. But fire does not trigger the ground for their preemptive action. And then by definition, for interceptor, once they do their preemptive action for phase 1, they don't have any phase 2. The turn already ends. And also for the ground, since they don't have any preemptive action trigger, so they just got phase 2. So that's kind of the pattern over here. So now for both of the interceptor, they will only do phase 1. That's why you got both interceptor doing phase 1 over here. And then for all the 3 grounds, they will only do phase number 2. They don't have any phase number 1. They are not triggered for the preemptive action. So that's why you got a ground 1, 2, and 4 over here. So Manor, did it make sense to you? Or you're still confused? All right, very good. Guys, any more questions? I think we are basically running out of time. But I hope going over AT11, AT015, also talking about enemy action pattern, and also the scoring today, I really hope that helped you, right? Clarifying the idea about the game. I will pause maybe for just one more moment to see if you got any final questions. But I would say any clarification you need, don't hesitate to really put your question on the forum. I think both me and Kevin will try to respond to you. We might be responding a little bit more slowly over the weekend, but we'll try our best. Amir, we wish had another time for an example of scoring. Oh, you mean for the actual Oracle, right? Yeah, we actually don't. Actually, yeah, we don't. Yeah, unfortunately. So Amir, I think the best way for you to do is you want to really maybe for phase number 2, not for phase number 1. For phase number 2, you really want to prepare some acceptance tests, which you got several kinds of enemies on the board, and then somehow try to destroy them somehow, maybe just by creating some collision, and then to see how the score will change, right? One question from Mohammed. Oh, you're talking about scoring, yes. Let me emphasize again, that's really important. So basically think about, let me just go to the very first one. Let's say if this is a current focus for the Starfighter, when will you actually expand the focus of the Starfighter by some enemy's focus, right? Some enemy's focus or orb when the enemy is destroyed. And now it doesn't matter how the enemy is destroyed, either because the enemy simply collide with the Starfighter, or the enemy collide with a friendly projectile, or because they collide with another enemy. Well, basically, as long as the enemy got destroyed, regardless of the reason, they will drop their orbments to be expanded to the Starfighter's focus. Yes. Very good. Any more questions? Yeah, but if you guys got more questions for clarification, please post on the forum, all right? And then once again, I got office hours next week, as usual, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 p.m. to 5:30. If you wish to talk about your design or any issues about the course, you may also want to start thinking about maybe the exam, right? It may be about a month away, but you may want to start thinking about it as well. If you got any issues related to your course material, speak to me, all right? Okay, you're welcome, everybody. I hope that helps. Yeah, just keep sending questions to us, and then we'll help you hopefully complete the projects. Yeah. All right, I'll end the video now, and then I'll see you hopefully next week. All right, take care.